Welcome to the American Center. Chairman Fahrenkopf, Ambassador Miller, friends. What a turnout. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important and interesting program about U.S. electoral process and presidential debates. I'm Josh Camp. I'm one of the public diplomacy officers here at the American Center in Dhaka. Tonight's program is part of a series of more than 20 programs celebrating the U.S. election, democracy, and citizen participation in government. Today we have a wonderful speaker to share his experience and knowledge with us. But first, I'd like to share some ground rules. Your microphones have been muted and will remain muted throughout the program. We encourage questions, so please submit your questions in the chat box below. After Chairman Fahrenkopf's presentation, we'll begin taking questions from the field. I'll consolidate those questions and ask the chairman. If you have limited bandwidth and your video is lagging, please consider turning off your video cast to preserve your bandwidth and improve your viewer experience. Also, tonight, we're offering a Bengali Sign Language interpreter. If you require sign language interpretation, please swipe through the gallery view until you identify Araful Islam, the sign language interpreter, and spotlight his video feed on your mobile phone or computer screen. U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh, Earl Miller, is a career member of the U.S. Foreign Service. He has worked across South Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. He has worked here in Bangladesh now, believe it or not, sir, nearly 2 years. Ambassador Miller, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Shobhoshonda, apneder maje ashte pare, ami gorbito, abon kobi an nondito. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you and yours are safe and well. A very special welcome and thank you to Mr. Frank Fahrenkopf for being with us this evening to discuss the role debates play in the electoral process and civic engagement, and how timely with our own American presidential debates just around the corner. Before we begin that discussion, let us remember in our thoughts and hearts those most directly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. We remember and mourn those we have lost. We wish well those who are ill and send our best wishes to their families and loved ones. Let's also remember and recognize the frontline workers confronting the pandemic every day, doctors and nurses and government workers and police officers, those providing essential services like food and medicine, journalists who give us accurate information about the pandemic, everyone on the front lines risking their health to protect ours. They deserve our gratitude and admiration. And this pandemic drives home how truly interdependent we all are on this vulnerable planet we are so privileged to share and protect. We will get through this pandemic together. We will prevail together. We have done so many times in the past. The people of the United States and Bangladesh have rolled up our sleeves and dealt with floods and cyclones and terror attacks and other diseases. We will prevail and build on that wonderful legacy. You know, the United States has provided over $4 billion in total U.S. assistance over the past 20 years to our partner and friend Bangladesh, including over $1 billion for health assistance. And to date, we have provided $56.4 million in assistance to help Bangladesh combat COVID-19. So America's commitment to Bangladesh has never been more important, and our commitment to each other has never been stronger. And what a fascinating topic this evening. You know, I was going to be on the debate team in university, but someone talked me out of it. Never heard that before, did you, Frank? Former US Vice President Hubert Humphrey said, freedom is hammered out on the anvil of discussion, dissent, and debate. And President John F. Kennedy said, without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. Voices of dissent and disagreement are essential for a healthy democracy. They are powerful and necessary. They reflect the values and civic self-confidence of the United States and Bangladesh. And as this remarkable country prepares to celebrate its 50th anniversary of independence next year, it's a good time to ask one of the most vital questions. Is the nation living up to its founding democratic ideals and principles? Because the story of every great democracy, of course, is that struggle to live up to its founding principles, ongoing and imperfect. We, the people, must be part of that struggle and ceaseless effort. We, the people, preserve democracy and by holding elected officials accountable, even before they are elected. Because a presidential debate, after all, is a job interview with the American voter. And speaking of voting, many of you have heard me say this before, you have to vote. The only way to practice democracy is to practice democracy. The most important office, and the one which all of us can and should fill, is that of an engaged, responsible private citizen. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Every election is determined by the people who show up. Bad officials are elected by good citizens who don't vote. And if you don't vote, you're ignoring history and giving away the future. And the late, great Congressman John Lewis said, freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high in a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we must all take, and each generation must do its part to create an even more fair, more just society. Ours is not a struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or one presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, and maybe even many lifetimes, and each one of us in every generation must do our part. At the U.S. Embassy, we have many programs you can be a part of that strengthen democratic practices and good governance, human rights, and equal justice for all under the law. I encourage you to reach out to the American Center and check the Embassy Facebook page for more information and more terrific programs like this. So again, thank you all very, very much for attending this session. Thank you. Onak onak donaba.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Miller. And across Bangladesh, the U.S. Embassy operates 6 cultural outreach centers. The American Center right here in Dhaka, where I am. Unfortunately, I sit here alone tonight, but soon in the future, we'll all return. Apologies, the automatic light went out to save electricity. So please, join us online at the American Center in Dhaka, EMK Center, our co-host for tonight's event, or the American Corners in Khulna, Rajshahi, Sylhet, and Chittagong. Tonight, we're so pleased to have the chairman and co-founder of the Commission on Presidential Debates, Frank Fahrenkopf. He is a great friend to democracy, a founder of the National Endowment for Democracy, among many other remarkable accomplishments. With the first presidential debates right around the corner, wow. Thank you so much for joining us here in Bangladesh. Chairman of the Presidential Commission on Debates, Frank Fahrenkopf.
And ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be with you tonight. I have a PowerPoint presentation that goes into the background of the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm not going to read everything that's on it, but the purpose is to give you an idea of what it is, who we are, and what we do. First of all, while Commission on Presidential Debates sounds like an official entity of the US government, it is not. We are a private, nonpartisan organization. We're independent. We would be what most of you would know in the State Department word, an NGO, a non-government organization. We're not controlled by any of the political parties in the United States. We do not endorse candidates. We get no funding from any of the political parties, from the federal government, or any of the candidates. And we have conducted every general election debate since 1988. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. There we go. I think the important point that most people don't recognize is that there is no requirement at all that a presidential candidate has to debate. In fact, the first presidential debates that were televised was back in 1960 when then Vice President Richard Nixon debated Senator John Kennedy of Massachusetts. After that, we went 16 years without another televised debate between the presidential candidates. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded John F. Kennedy after his assassination, refused to debate. And then in the next two cycles, former Vice President Nixon was one of the candidates, and he refused to debate. And it wasn't until 1976 that we again had a presidential debate. That was at that time between Gerald Ford, who became president with the resignation of Richard Nixon, and with the former governor of the state of Georgia, Jimmy Carter. So then in 1980, a very important thing happened in that there were now an independent candidate. The nominee of the Republican Party was Ronald Reagan, the former governor of California. The nominee of the Democratic Party was President Jimmy Carter, who won that race against Gerald Ford. And there was third-party candidate or independent candidate. His name was John Anderson. He was a congressman from the state of Illinois. Now, at that time, the debates were conducted by the League of Women Voters, another NGO located in the United States. And there are a lot of problems developed in that particular series of debates in 1980 and 84. And so what happened was in 1985, a study was put together by the Center for Strategic and International Studies at Georgetown University. It was a center of how can we do a better job of electing our president. And also a year later at Harvard University's Kennedy Institute of Politics, they also had a study. And both of those independent studies came to, with regard to debates, a single resolution. And that is that there should be created an entity that exists for one purpose and one purpose only. And that is to conduct the general election, presidential and vice presidential debates every 4 years. Next slide, please. So this photograph is a picture of me when I did not have gray hair. I had black hair a long time ago. That's me when I was chairman of the Republican Party of the United States for President Reagan. And the gentleman to my right, your left, looking at it, is Paul Kirk. He was the chairman of the Democratic Party during that period of time. And both of us, in response to the Harvard and Georgetown studies, created in February of 1987, the Commission on Presidential Debates. Next slide, please. I show you this just to show you who was on the debate commission back then. Again, we're talking about 1987, and this board of directors was on board for our conducting of the 1980 co-chairman. John Culver was at that time United States Senator from Iowa. Pamela Harriman was a very prominent Democrat. She went on to become the United States ambassador to France, and unfortunately, she actually passed away in Paris while serving in that capacity. Vernon Jordan, who was at that time the chief of staff for former Vice President Mondale. David Norcross was a political leader from the state of New Jersey. Governor Kay Orr was the governor of the state of Nebraska. Representative Barbara Vukanovich was a United States member of the House of Representatives from Nevada. And Senator Pete Wilson was a United States senator from the state of California. And the executive director, and who's still with us from the very time he formed, his name was Janet Brown. Quickly, a look at the next slide, if we can. These are some of the members that over the last 30 years, when we get that slide up, have served on the commission. They included someone like Paul Coverdale, a former United States Senator from Georgia, Mitch Daniels, who is now presently the president of Purdue University in the United States in Indiana and the former governor of Indiana, Caroline Kennedy, the daughter of John F. Kennedy, who served with us until she became U.S. ambassador to Japan, and she stepped down. John Lewis, who was just referred to by the ambassador, the U.S. representative of Georgia, who just passed away within the last few months. Leon Panetta, former Secretary of Defense, Director of the CIA, White House Chief of Staff. Dr. Shirley Tiggleman, the former president of Princeton University. So these are some of the people who over the years have served on the commission. Next slide, please. This will be slide number 8 for those of you moving the slides. I don't see it yet on the screen. Yeah, slide number 8. Here we go. No, that's the one before. Next slide. Here we go. This is the present makeup of the commission. You will notice, no, back one flip. There you go. These are our honorary co-chairmen, former presidents who participated in our debates. You'll notice the co-chair emeritus, Paul Kirk. Paul Kirk, you remember, was the co-chairman with me when we created the commission. However, when Teddy Kennedy died, Senator Teddy Kennedy of Massachusetts, Paul Kirk was appointed by the governor of the state of Massachusetts to fill out a portion of former Senator Kennedy's term until a special election was declared, and he had to step down at that point. Next slide, please. Now, one of the big differences that we have to do, not only when I do State Department presentations, but in the United States, people get mixed up between the primary debates and the general election debates. The primary debates are conducted by each of the political parties, and their debates are usually sponsored by one of the media outlets. Could be NBC, could be Fox News, could be ABC. They're totally different from those that we conduct. We use a single moderator, which I'll get to in a moment. There are no commercial breaks for us, while there are commercials that run during the primary debates. And this is usually before the conventions takes place. So there's a big, big difference, and I'll go into it a little bit more in just a second. Next slide, please. Now, one of the most interesting and in many ways contentious problems with the debates in the states that we face every 4 years is who gets invited to participate in the debates, because there are of the United States and register with the Federal Election Commission by the commission to participate in a presidential debate. You must meet a number of requirements. The first is what's in the United States Constitution. You must be 35 years of age. You have to have been born in the United States and otherwise eligible under the Constitution. But those are the basic constitutional requirements. As you know, we do not elect our presidents by who gets the most votes on election day. We have something that goes back to the founding of the United States called the Electoral College, where each state gets a number of ballots in the Electoral College based upon how many members they have in Congress. And in order to be elected president, you must achieve 270 of those votes. Now that's very confusing to some people. As you may recall, if you followed the election in 2016, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton got many more votes on election day. But however, most of those votes were in the state of California, the state of New York, and other liberal centers in the United States. But we don't elect our president by who gets the most votes on election day. We elect our president in the United States by who achieves 270 electoral votes, where each of the states, large and small, have an opportunity to participate in the Electoral College. And of course, Donald Trump achieved many more than 270 electoral votes, even though he lost the popular vote. So you must be on enough ballots, on enough states that if you win, you can achieve 270 electoral votes. And the last and most controversial one is a rule that we took from the League of Women Voters when they conducted the debates back in 1976, 1980, and 1984. And that is called the 15% rule. A week before each of the debates, we choose 5 polls, and let's go to the next slide, because I think it shows you what the polls are. Yeah, we use the Gallup organization, and you'll see at the bottom of this slide, 5 polls: ABC Washington Post poll, CNN poll, Fox News poll, NBC Wall Street Journal poll, NPR PBS Network, and Marist poll. And what we do is we look at those polls 1 week before each debate. And someone must be at 15% in the poll to be invited. Now, you remember when I told you that in 1980, there were 3 candidates: John Anderson, an independent candidate, Ronald Reagan, the former governor of California, the nominee of the Republican Party, and President Jimmy Carter. When the first debate was scheduled by the League of Women Voters, John Anderson was at 17% in the average of the polls. And therefore, the League of Women Voters invited him to participate, and he said yes. Polls also reflected that former Governor Reagan of California was well above 15% and invited him to participate, and he said yes. And of course, President Carter, nominee of the Democratic Party, also was way above 15%, and the League of Women Voters said, hell no, I won't go. He refused to debate, so long as John Anderson was also on the platform. My point here is that, again, as I told you, Lyndon Johnson and Nixon in the 60s refused to debate. And here, Jimmy Carter, even though he was the sitting president of the United States, refused to debate, so long as John Anderson was involved. When the second debate date rolled around, Mr. Anderson had fallen to 12%. So he was not invited to participate in the next debate. Jimmy Carter then accepted the debate, and he and Ronald Reagan debated. And that year, they only had 1 debate. So these 5 polls that you see, what we will be using in the next month and a half on determining who will be invited to participate in the presidential debates as they go forward. Next slide, please. Now, the format has changed dramatically. What I mean by that is, how is the debate conducted? I'm not going to go through all of this in details, but there have been some changes. Historically, going back even to the time of 1960, it was that there was a moderator and usually a panel of reporters, maybe 3 reporters from the news media. And they would each ask questions. And I found that disturbing from the standpoint that there was no follow-up. In other words, if the first reporter asked a question and the candidates didn't answer it in the time allotted for them to answer, they went around the corner and didn't really get to the meat of it, the second reporter would never follow up because he or she had thought very hard on their question. So what we did is we tried an experiment in 1992 when we had 3 candidates again. And this time it was President George H.W. Bush. It was former Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas, and Ross Perot, a very wealthy businessman in the United States. And so when we had our debate at Michigan State University, we tried an experiment. for the first half of the debate, the first 45 minutes, we had this old system, a moderator and 3 reporters asking questions. The second half of that debate, we said, all right, we're just going to have the moderator. And with the ability of that moderator to follow up and see that the question is answered. And ever since then, ever since that 1992 debate, we go with a single moderator for all the debates. There was one exception to that, and that was in 2016 when we did the town hall meeting, and that's where private citizens asked the questions. We used 2 members of the media, and we won't do that again. Didn't go very well. So you see here that the viewership of the debate is significantly greater than any other political program. In 2016, we've averaged between 30 million and 85 million viewers. But the interesting thing about that is that does not count those people who stream the debate on their computer or on their iPad or on their iPhone. It also doesn't count those people who are watching on C-SPAN. The best estimates that we have are that first debate 4 years ago attracted well over 100 million viewers. And it is my prediction that this year, the first debate that I'll talk about in just a moment, which will take place on the 29th of September, I believe will have well over 120 million viewers. A very, very important debate. Now we know that, as you see, but we talk to people who watch on television. Roughly 70% of them say that the debates are a very, very important, an important factor of who they vote for. It's not the only factor, but it's one that they follow. Next, please. Now, remember, I told you that in the primary debates, they're conducted and produced by the networks. We do not do that. We produce our own debates, and the camera provisions are provided by the White House pool, and that's all of them together. And so what we call it in the business, it's a roadblock. And what that means is that all of the networks, ABC, CBS, CNN, C-SPAN, Fox, NBC, MSNBC, Hispanic programs, all carry it. And it's 90 minutes with no commercial breaks or interruptions. Next. Now, one of the hardest decisions that we face as a commission, in particular cycle, because what's happened, in my view, over the last 4 years is different networks have become totally prejudiced one way or the other as to who they're going to support in the presidential race. And so what we're looking for is the moderator. As you see, there are 3 factors. You're familiar with the candidates and the major issues of the presidential campaign. They have extensive experience in live television broadcast news, because while that moderator is sitting there, he has a little microphone in his ear where he's being talked to off stage by the producers, letting him know on time, how much time should be allotted, and so forth. So we need someone who has that experience and an understanding that the debate should focus maximum time and attention on the candidates and their views, and not on what they, as moderators, what their views are. And so we make very, very clear to the people that we choose as moderators that it is not their job to be a fact checker, to check what one candidate is saying or another, whether it's true or not. If a candidate says something that doesn't go along with what they've been saying throughout the campaign, the moderator shouldn't say, well, wait a minute, that's not what you said last week. That's for the other candidate to know, and to each other, and argue with each other, and debate each other. And so the moderator's job is to facilitate that. Now, I should tell you that the moderators alone select the questions to be asked, which are not known to anybody. I don't know, I never get to know what they are. And what in the campaigns, they do not meet with the campaigns. The campaigns, by the way, have no say, or the parties, in when the debates are, where the debates are, who the moderators are going to be, and what the formats are going to be. We, as an independent body, do that without talking to them, without seeking their advice. And I should tell you that what we do with the first, Slide number 16. People on this slide were moderators last night. So with the Reserve University and the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio on September 29th, and will be moderated by Chris Wallace of Fox News. And then let's jump down for a moment to the third presidential debate, October 22nd at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. And the moderator will be Kristen Welker, who is with NBC News. Now, what will happen a week before the first debate on September 29th and a week before the last debate on October 22nd, Mr. Wallace and Kristen Welker will each announce that what they're going to do is that in the 90 minutes that is set for the debate, they're going to divide the 90 minutes into 6 15-minute segments, 6 15-minute segments. And they will say what the subject matter, not the question, but what the subject matter will be in each of the 6. In other words, foreign policy, tax policy, healthcare, handling of the pandemic virus, etc. And then what will happen is, for example, the first question, Chris Wallace will ask, I don't know who he's going to ask first, and he's the only one who knows what he's going to say. Say, all right, let's say it's about foreign policy. He will ask a question of one of the candidates on foreign policy, and that candidate will have 2 minutes to reply. Then the other candidate has 2 minutes to reply. And for the remainder of the 15 minutes, Chris Wallace can drill down and ask those questions, the candidates, to do a better job of explaining where they are in those issues, so they're not just repeating something that they get off the campaign trail, which is a 2-minute answer. So it's an ability for the moderator to really get these candidates to say clearly what their position are on the issues. Kristen Welker will do the same thing before the last debate on October 22nd. Now, the vice presidential debate, which you see is a week after the first presidential debate, this year will be held on October 7th at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the moderator will be Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief of USA Today. Now, Susan will divide the 90 minutes into 9 10-minute segments. And what she will not announce, as the presidential moderators do, what each segment will be. So she will take, in her own mind, she will have laid out 9 subjects, and she will then ask those questions and drill down. Now, the second presidential debate, which is in Miami, Florida, and Steve Scully of C-SPAN will be the moderator, is what we call the town hall meeting. Historically, what we have done is gathered together in the town where the town hall meeting will be held, citizens who have not yet made up their mind who they're going to vote for. And again, historically, we've had between 50 and 100 people. They sit in a bleachers, like a theater in the round, and they are the ones who ask the question. The private citizens ask the candidates the questions. And unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, there's no way that we can have 50 to 100 people in bleachers to ask the questions. As I said, the Cleveland Clinic is advising the commission on all the debates, on social distancing, on other health requirements to make sure that our audiences are safe and so forth. Historically, we've averaged about 900 people in the audience. Sometimes it's been 1,200, sometimes it's been 600. It depends on the size and working space of the particular forum where we're holding the debate. But I know what's going to happen this time. The Cleveland Clinic, because of social distancing, I think, to get to 3 figures, I think will be maybe somewhere between 10 and 100 people who will be allowed to come in and be the observers of the debate. And also with regard to the town hall meeting, the number of people who will be asking the questions clearly will not be 50 to 100 that we normally have. I have no idea. I haven't talked to the Cleveland Clinic people yet, and they haven't told us whether or not there'll be 8 people on the stage who will ask the questions, or 10 or 15. That'll all be their decision, depending on what their medical guidelines are and protocols are, so that those people who are participating and answering questions can be safe. So that the staff and cameramen and lighting people can be safe, the candidates can be safe, and of course the people in the audience. So that's the work of the commission. I have, it's called Nantucket. I'm on my way back right now to Washington. I'm halfway there, and we will begin the work to get it done. Both candidates, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has agreed to participate in the 3 debates. Vice President Pence has agreed to participate in the vice presidential debate. Also, former Vice President Biden has agreed to participate in the 3 presidential debates. And Kamala Harris, the Democratic city. So we are going forward as quickly as we can to do the preparation. As I said, I think the first debate will be extremely important this year, and that my guess is it'll be well in excess of 120 million people, not only in the United States, but around the world watching it. Next slide, please. Now, what we also do is something called Debate Watch. And as you'll see here, universities, civic groups, libraries, other educational organizations across the United States participate in what we call Debate Watch. We have people that will gather, say on a university campus. We have people who will go to a public meeting hall, and they watch the debate, between 12 and 20 people. And the minute the debate is over, the television is turned off, so that those people in the room are not hearing what the so-called political experts on all the networks are saying about who won or who lost, or what was a good question or what was a bad question. But they then discuss what they saw, what they liked, what they didn't like, and we get those Debate Watch reports, and we take that into consideration when we consider what changes we might make for the next year. Final slide, please. Now, we don't just do work, long road, starting when Paul Kirk and I created around the world with our friends at the Institute. The Democratic Institute for International Affairs has been our partner, but we provide advice and technical assistance, all aspects of debates around the globe. And these are, in many cases, emerging democracies. You see there, we have now a network of approximately 35 countries working together to help each other start or improve debates. And the picture below at the bottom shows we bring them, and they're all NGOs, by the way. These are not government organizations. These are NGOs who want to, in their country, sponsor debates among their respective leaders. And we do a seminar once a year or every other year in Washington, D.C. And this picture, and this time I think it's the final debate, again, the one at Belmont University. As we did last time in 2016, it was the final debate in Las Vegas, Nevada. We invite many of them to come. We had 35 people representing 50 nations who came and observed the final debate. So we're working very, very hard across the world to have those people who would lead a nation and lead the people have to stand up against their opponent and civilly debate as to who they're going to vote for. So to take any questions, and I don't know, I hand it back to Josh or who's going to take it from here.
Thank you, Chairman Fahrenkopf. This is Josh Campier. I'm back. Thank you so much for that presentation. We've had many questions come up during the course of your presentation. The first question that I'd like to ask, though, is related to the structure of elections most generally. We've had several questions about direct voting and the Electoral College. Obviously a little different than presidential debates. Do you feel comfortable describing?
Sure, I can discuss that.
Thank you.
There's a wonderful book. I think it's called, I'll get the correct title. It's by a man named Stewart. I think it's called The Summer of 1787. It talks about what happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when our founding founders got together to create the Constitution, and the difficulty that they had in determining how they were going to proceed. And a lot of compromises were made. At that time, back then, there were 13 colonies. However, the big colonies were Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania. And those three colonies where most of the capital was organized, business was organized, trade was. The other 10 colonies were farming communities. They didn't have the kind of basis in economics that the big three had. So there was great distrust by the other 10 colonies of whether or not, if you just went with whoever got the most votes, that the issues of concern to the citizens of the other colonies would not be considered. It would always be, the candidates would go to Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania, and the other 10 would be ignored. So a lot of compromises were created. One was how the Senate and House was set up. As you know, in the United States Senate, every state, regardless of its size geographically or the number of people who live there, each get 2 senators, only 2 senators. At Nevada, where I'm originally from, which is a very, very small state, we still have 2 senators. And then the House of Representatives, each state gets members in the House depending upon what their population is, and is redone every 10 years by a census. And one of the other factors that was created was the creation of the Electoral College. Rather than just elect our president on who gets the most votes, which in those early days, most of the votes would come from those major colonies, they wanted to take into consideration the concerns and issues of the other 10 colonies. And therefore, a decision was made not to, and a compromise was made not to elect that person who got the most votes, but the who gets 270 electoral votes. So that's the background. It goes all the way back to the creation of our way of holding elections and so forth. Now, there's always movement, I must tell you, in close elections by certain people in the United States that want to do away with the Electoral College. There's some movement on right now in discussion. But however, the smaller state, if that would happen, all what would happen is Florida, New York, California, and Texas would be the only states who would really get the attention of the candidates, and the others would not. So that's the basis of where it came about. And it's a system that has survived ever since the founding fathers created it.
Thank you. Voter participation in any election has a significant impact on an election result. Some questions we've received are related to voter turnout.
Yes.
One questioner asks, why are Democrats and Republicans not enthusiastic about participating in the voting process this year? And particularly, what's the concern with mail voting? And certainly, if you feel uncomfortable answering this kind of question, absolutely okay.
No, I have no problem with that. You know, and it's a very good question because historically, Americans have not been tremendous voters to turn out. As you know, in many countries, it's required voting. Now, they're not normally democratic countries. Everyone has to vote or you're in trouble with the government. That is not the case. We're a democracy, which means that a person has a freedom to make a decision, whether to participate in the process or not. I feel those people who don't vote are not really living up to their obligations as a citizen. I believe that as a citizen of democracy, you have a duty to participate and to vote. But we're lucky sometimes to get 55 to 60% who will participate. Now, I believe it'll be more this time. What the coronavirus has done is created, in many cases, a fear of voters to walk to the polling place to go into a polling place where other people are voting. There are monitors there. There are election officials because of the coronavirus. The best voters historically in the United States are senior citizens. The older you are, the more likely you are to vote. And they're as you know, with this virus, they're the most susceptible to get the virus, and they're most endangered with regard to whether or not they're going to survive or not. And so what's happened now is many states have changed their rules so that people can now vote by mail. It used to be, for example, I do a lot of traveling. I live in Virginia, and when I was going to be away on a trip, I would have to go to the campaign headquarters or the election headquarters for the state and fill out a form saying, I am going to be out of the state on election day. Therefore, I would like to vote absentee. And I could sit down right then and vote absentee. I wouldn't have to vote on November 3rd. But other states say, all right, you come and fill out that form and we'll send you a ballot. And then you can fill out the ballot and mail it back in. I believe that the numbers are incredible of what I've seen so far in this cycle. Because of the fear of the coronavirus, because the laws have been changed in many states to make it easier to vote by mail, I think you're going to see a tremendous turnout. I believe of all of the votes that are cast, you may get as many as, 4 years ago, it was between 35 and 40 million who voted by mail. I believe this time it could be as high as 60% of the American people will vote with mail-in ballots. Now, there's some controversy concerning it. Number one, is this the post office to have the ability to get those things to the election officials in time where who the winner is. There's some people who say, it may be weeks afterwards, which create very great unease. The president and his party are concerned about early voting by mail because they want to make sure it's secure and that every vote is going to get counted. So it's controversial now, but I think you're going to see more voting by mail, not only in this cycle, but I think, as coronavirus has changed the world and how we do business because of Zoom, I think one of the things that's going to come out of it is there will be more voting by mail in future elections, so long as this works out well in this election and we're not having problems afterwards. I don't know if that answers the question, Josh.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, on August 31st, we hosted the first of 3 U.S. speaker programs about U.S. elections. That program was focused on disability inclusion and electoral processes. During that program, the presenter explained how expanding absentee voting, in particular, things like mail-in voting, can actually help to enfranchise the disabled and mobility impaired voters in particular. Chairman, you mentioned earlier that the Commission on Presidential Debates is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and that primary debates are conducted by other entities. Could you tell us first, in your opinion, how influential is the location of a debate? And what is the thought process, the deliberations that go into choosing a location? Do swing states matter when selecting that location?
No, I'll tell you how we do it. And it used to be also with the party conventions. It was always thought, well, maybe if we hold a convention in a particular state that's an important state, that will help us get more votes. It didn't work then. It doesn't work now. But what we do in selecting sites is we send out 1 year, at least 1 year before the debates, proposals for bids, in effect, to all colleges and universities in the United States who wish to host a debate and to consider whether they want to host it. We get in, depending on what particular year it may be, and whether or not universities have endowment programs going on or fundraising drives, we'll get as many as 40 universities who want to host the debates, or maybe it will only be 15, it varies. We then have a team of cameramen, lighting people, producers and so forth have worked with us for years will go out and visit those universities to see whether or not they have on campus a facility that can handle it. And then they come back and report to us. They usually have made a cut. It's not as many as originally started. And then the most important part is the Secret Service. The Secret Service goes out and visits all of them. They, of course, are concerned with being able to provide security to the candidates and everyone else. And they will then come back to us with their feelings. We then look at it as a commission, and if we had a perfect world, we would choose one university in the Northeast, one in the South, one in the Midwest, and one on the West Coast. Regardless of whether it's a swing state or not a swing state, and of course on how good their bid is to host it. And that's how it's happened that we get every region represented. In fact, on a couple of occasions, Washington University in St. Louis became the Western choice because they were on the west side of the Mississippi River, because we didn't get acceptable bids from schools out there. So that's how the process goes. But in our choosing, we don't choose swing states. We choose states, universities and states where they can have the facilities to accomplish the job and where the Secret Service feels comfortable with the facility. Over the last 10 years, we have done a number of debates at Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, and at Washington University, because those are facilities that the Secret Service feels very, very comfortable with regard to being able to lock the campus down for security purposes.
Thank you. Obviously, money plays a role in election politics. What role do donations from corporations or individuals play in the Commission on Presidential Debates? And how does the Commission maintain its nonpartisan foundation?
Yeah, two good questions. Number one, we raise all our money privately. Most of it comes from foundations and corporations who donate to the commission. They get nothing for it. It's their, they feel that having these fair elections and fair debates is good government and good contribution. We might mention them. There's no sign up saying that they've contributed. So, but that's where most of our money comes from. And we've been successful. Some of them have been with us for years in supporting us. And I forgot your last part. I'm sorry, Josh, you had at the end, you had said something else.
And so with donors, with private donors supporting the commission, how does the commission maintain a nonpartisan balance?
Oh, yes. So what we do is, if you're on the commission, you must agree, number one, you will not support either presidential candidate. You will not go on the campaign trail and work for them. You will not go on television shows and support them in any way or talk to reporters. You have to be neutral. You have to be down the middle. You can't make contributions to them. You cannot make any federal contributions to candidates whatsoever. And if you have problems with that, you must step down. For example, back when George W. Bush was president, his vice president was Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney had been a former congressman from the state of Wyoming. Well, one of his best friends was a United States senator from Wyoming who was on the commission. And during the campaign, the vice president Cheney asked the senator if he would ride with him. They were friends for years, being from Wyoming, on the plane and campaign with him. And then he had to step down. So if you're going to be involved in any way, having to go on television and support a candidate, you must step down and resign from the commission. And so over the years, we've been around for going on 33 years. We started in 1987. I think the fact that we have been totally neutral in what we do and that no commissioner is out campaigning for someone That's why we've been able to survive, Josh. Otherwise, we would not be here for all this time.
Thank you. Do you believe that the commission, and specifically presidential debates and candidate debates in general, impact citizen engagement and the education of voters? Or do you believe that voters have predetermined their preferences and the debates are simply pro forma?
That's a good question. And what we've done is, it's of course done much polling after the election. First of all, there's a dichotomy. You must realize this, again, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, between the primary debates and the general election debate. The primary debates, I mean, I think in 2016, the Republicans had 17 candidates who participate in the debate. And this cycle, I think the Democrats at one time had 24 candidates running for the nomination, and you'd have 10 on the stage. And if you were one of those candidates, you were lucky in the primary debates if you got 2 minutes where you could say. So I think the primary debates, with all this overload of candidates, makes it very difficult to really impact. But when you get to the general election debates, when you only have either 2 or 3 candidates, there's no question, as I said earlier, that about 70% of the people say that watching that debate is extremely important to them as to how they're going to vote. It's not the only thing. Now, I should have mentioned this with regard to the mail-in ballot. One of the claims of both candidates, as you know, is they want people to participate in early voting when you get your ballot vote. We've done a tremendous amount of research on those people who vote by mail or absentee ballot. In 2016, now there was no pandemic then, on the time of the first debate, only 0.006% of voters had already voted by mail. And what it showed us, and the experts say, is there's 2 kinds of voters with mail-in ballots. There are those who get the ballot, they follow politics, they may be very partisan, they know who they're going to vote for, and debates or nothing else is going to change their mind. They will vote immediately, put it in the envelope, and send it back maybe the same day that they get it, even before the debates take place. But the overwhelming majority of people who vote by mail, just because you have the ballot, they don't vote. It normally is the last 2 weeks before the date of election where they cast their ballots. So there are some people who know already who they're going to vote for, and the debates aren't going to make any difference, or they may just reinforce their position. But the overwhelming majority of people, from what our statistics tell us, wait, they want to see how they debate. And, you know, there's some really important questions. This will be the first time that these 2 people will be together on the stage. And in many cases, as you know, Vice President Biden has really not been on so I think the American people want to see the 2 of them together and exchanging views on these issues. So that's why I think this first debate will be very important, and that even if you've got a ballot in hand a week before, you're probably going to wait until after that debate to make your choice and send in your ballot.
Thank you. Obviously, the structure of any debate can drastically influence the outcome, depending on the particular debater's proficiencies or weaknesses. Who is responsible for designing the allocation of time for initial statements, rebuttals, counter-rebuttals, or direct candidate-to-candidate interaction?
Those decisions are made by the commission, and it varies from debate to debate. As I went into in some detail, the first presidential debate, the one in Cleveland, and a final debate, which will take place in Nashville, those 90 minutes will be divided into those 15-minute sections, which will focus on the issues. And the question right now as to whether or not there'll be opening statements or closing statements that you've normally gotten is an open one. We haven't yet decided whether we're going to allow that or whether or not we're going to just go right in to the issues. But those decisions are made by us on the commission. We've been doing this, as I said, since 1988. We have done 30 now. The last debate in Las Vegas in 2016 was the 30th presidential or vice presidential debate we've done. So we sort of know how to do it. And so we lay out how that is done. And again, the moderator has a very important part to play in that. And so we like the system that we have, and we think it's been productive. The only other suggestion that I would make, Josh, that I push for, and I've been successful sometimes, but not always, is remember, I think the view is we're not electing the best debater. That's not the job here. It's not the best debater, or even who's the smartest person. That's not. The American people, I've learned, want to like their president. They want to like their president and respect their president. And that's through all of the years that I've been doing this. 2016 was very interesting, and 2020 is following along with it. The candidates in 2016, neither one of them had approval ratings above 50% by the American people. The American people weren't happy with either of them. And right now, we're sort of seeing that here. And so what I would, if I had my preference, is there would one debate would be with the formal old debate style with the candidates standing behind podiums. The town hall meeting, as you know, is questions being asked. They normally sit on what looks like a bar stool with a table in front of them, but they're free to walk around. And if I had my way, one of the debates would be they would be seated at a table with a single moderator. We have done some of these. We've done in the vice presidential races. We did it with John McCain and Obama in one cycle. And I think the nature and tenor of discourse changes when you're seated at a table rather than a podium, which acts sort of like a wall, if you will. Now, we've been successful in sometimes, but if the candidates insist that they don't want to sit at the table, we're not going to force them to sit at the table. And so, in fact, 4 years ago, both the the Secretary of State and Mr. Trump said they would prefer to do the first and last at podiums, and we didn't push the issue. But I think down the road, I'm still going to go, because then the American public are seeing the candidates in 3 different views: standing at a podium, walking around, answer questions from citizens, and seated at a table, so that they can get a better perception. But that's only my personal opinion. I don't always win on my personal opinion, not with the commission or with my wife.
Well, thank you. In your experience with the commission and other experiences working in the promotion of democracy, do you have any recommendations or suggestions for states or countries looking to formalize debate structure for political processes?
Yeah, if you look at that last page that I showed in the PowerPoint presentation, there is at the very bottom that portion of our website devoted to emerging democracies, existing democracies who would like to do something like the presidential debates. And like I say, it's just grown like topsy from people who want to do it in NGOs. And there will tell you step by step how to do it. And we actually send, Josh, some of our professional people to that country to assist them in putting on that debate and how to do it and structure it. So there's plenty of information there, and we have the wherewithal, because of all these people I showed you in the picture. If they're located near you, they'll come there too and help you get it done. And that's the way it's so very, very important. And it has really grown, and we're very, very proud of that.
Chairman, I think we probably have time for about 2 more questions. One question we have pending. Okay. One more pending question is related to the role of the moderator. Throughout the course of the debate, obviously the moderator asks questions and often may challenge a candidate to ask for follow-up or clarification. What role does the moderator have in keeping the conversation on track, either to push the candidate to answer the question that was asked, or to try to correct the record if there are clear discrepancies?
That's a really good question, and it's a challenge. What we, as I say, when we sit down with the moderators and we select the moderators, we tell them there's a great difference between being a debate moderator and being a reporter who is interviewing a candidate. If I'm a reporter and I'm interviewing you, Josh, and I ask you a question and you don't answer the question, I can say, wait a minute, Josh, you haven't answered. Would you please answer the question? Or if you answer the question in a way that was contrary to what you said a week before, I'm going to say to you, wait a minute, Josh, you made a speech a week ago and you said this, now you're taking a different position. Where are you? That's what an interviewer does. That's not what a moderator does. An example, if you were the candidate who said something contrary to what you said a week ago, what I would do if I was the moderator, and most of my, will turn to the other candidate and say, do you agree with what candidate A just said? It's a debate has that moderator as the one who should say, wait a minute, excuse me, that candidate should say to the other candidate, you said last week that it's a different position. It's not the job of the moderator to fact check and correct. We had one episode, in all the years I've done this, only one time where a moderator went totally against that rule. And I won't publicly say, but she's never been on television again after that. Because the rule was she took the side of one of the candidates against another candidate. And she has disappeared from, just as you disappeared with the lights.
Yeah, sorry, you know, we...
and that's what we look for, by the way. We look, yeah. Does that happen every 15 minutes?
Conserve electricity, protect the environment, and be responsible stewards. Sometimes to our embarrassment.
Well, one of the things we do is we spend time, and no problem. But we look for that. We look for a seasoned person to be the moderator who understands what their role is. And so far, as I said, over the last 32 years, we've been fortunate, only once that really went off the tracks.
So obviously, the moderator is one part of the equation, the venue another, but finally, the audience. What is the role of the audience? How are they selected? Are they allowed to participate? And if an audience member is rowdy or claps or doesn't clap, what happens?
That's a great question. As I said earlier, we've normally had about an average of 900 people in the audience. Sometimes it's been 600, sometimes 1,200, depending upon the size of the venue. As I've said, because of the social distancing, we're not going to be anywhere near that. But historically, what happens is about 10 minutes before the debate begins, I come out on stage and I tell the audience, you are here, you are in a room where it's part of history is going to take place. There are 100 million people watching on television who want to make up their minds how to vote based upon what they see on television. If you clap, if you make noise, if you interfere in any way, you're interrupting what they're doing. So please don't do that. The moderator does the same thing. They are warned when they come in. And I always tell them, you know, the security here is provided by the Secret Service. So if you want a Secret Service agent to come and lift you up and carry you out, don't participate. And yelling and participating. We don't allow it. We very few times over the 30 debates that we've done it. And once in a while, maybe it's a little applause, but there really has not been that happen. And so we try to be that. Of course, if someone starts clapping, we can't stop them from clapping. And we're not going to pick them up and arrest them or anything. But again, we make it very clear on their ticket. It indicates you are not to clap or participate. You are not part of this program. This program is for the American people to view and make a decision on how they're going to vote for. And we've had very, very few interruptions.
Chairman, you've witnessed many presidential debates in your years. What advice do you have for young debaters new politicians, seasoned political candidates, what can a person do to become more prepared to stand on stage and answer difficult questions?
That's an interesting question, because I read an article in the New York Times this week that said that President Trump was not preparing as it's normally done. What normally happens over the years is the two parties and two candidates go through weeks of practice. They have one of their friends act as the other candidate, and they go through questions and answers and subject matter. But the story said that President Trump wasn't doing that. And interestingly enough, President Obama, for the first debate in 2012, before it was held in Denver, Colorado, at the University of Denver, he also didn't. He said, look, I'm the president of the United States. I deal with these issues every day. I don't have to sit and go through all these briefing books that you've prepared. George W. Bush, when he was running for re-election in 2004, also didn't do the homework necessary. And if you remember those debates, I think that John Kerry was successful in that first debate. And I think clearly Governor Romney was declared to be the winner in the debate that took place in Denver. And those politicians will tell you, well, they didn't make that mistake again. Before the next debates, they did their homework, and it paid off. I think the more that you get comfortable with speaking, most people are terrified of getting on their feet individually and speaking and being involved. For example, when we have the town hall meeting, we bring the people in the morning, and some of them have never held a microphone in their hand in their life, and they are terrified. And I remember one time I went and I gave it to a woman so that she's supposed to just say her name. She was so terrified of it, she couldn't say her name. She'd forgotten her name. So what you have to do is get experience of not being afraid to give your opinion, get on your feet. Speaking is easy when you get used to it and you get comfortable with it. But the important thing also is preparation. Those three presidents, we don't know yet about President Trump, how he's going to do in the first debate, but the other two presidents didn't prepare, didn't do their homework, and suffered the consequences. So you've got to know your subject, you've got to be prepared, but don't be afraid. Get up in the classroom. There are people sometimes in the classroom who never raise their hand because they're too shy or they're afraid. But have courage, stand on your own 2 feet, and have confidence in what you view the position to be that you're discussing.
Thank you. I believe it was First Lady, co-drafter of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, Eleanor Roosevelt, said, do one thing every day that scares you. And I think that sums up your advice there.
Very good advice. Very good advice.
So, sir, in closing, a final question for you. In your years with the Debate Commission, a funny story, something surprising that happened that we wouldn't otherwise know.
I guess it was in the first year that we did it in 1988. George Herbert Walker Bush, the Republican nominee, was 6'2", 6'2.5" tall. Michael Dukakis, the governor of Massachusetts, was the Democratic candidate, and Mike, on the best day, was maybe 5'7". We had podiums, and the podiums struck George Herbert Walker Bush on about the third button down with his shirt. Now, poor old Mike Dukakis he would have to reach up and look over the top to be the same height. So what we did, and George H.W. Bush was always a gentleman, had no objection. We built a pitcher's mound, a baseball pitcher's mound behind Michael Dukakis' podium. So when Governor Dukakis came out, he stepped up on the mound and hit him, the top of his podium, hit him on the third button shirt down. That's probably in the first year that we did it. There are many other things. I could go on for hours, but that was the one that I think I remember the most.
Well, wonderful, Chairman Fahrenkopf. We're reaching the end of our program tonight. And to our audience, I'm so sorry to those of you who have submitted questions tonight, which we've been unable to answer. I'd like to encourage you to continue to monitor the U.S. Embassy website and our Facebook page. Soon, we'll be announcing our third and final U.S. speaker program on October 21st, which will focus on the electoral process and answer many of your detailed questions about the Electoral College. Chairman Fahrenkopf, before we sign off for the evening, do you have any parting words for us? Words of wisdom?
Yeah, and I think it's primarily, already the words I would say were said, I thought, very elegantly by the ambassador in his remarks. You must vote. It doesn't do any good to complain about the government or politicians. Complaining is not going to get you anywhere. If you're unhappy with what's going on, you must go to the polls and vote. You must get people who agree with you to vote. And that's the only way that peaceful change can take place. And that's what democracy is all about.
Thank you so much, Chairman Fahrenkopf. Friends and colleagues all across Bangladesh, I'm so grateful that you have tuned in to this program by the U.S. Embassy here in Dhaka to attend this program with Chairman Frank Fahrenkopf about presidential debates in the United States and the U.S. electoral process. Our program tonight has been recorded and will be shared on Embassy social media in the near future. Thank you so much for your thoughtful questions. We look forward to seeing you join us again for the next program in our U.S. election series in celebration of democracy and citizen participation in government. Thank you all so much. Thank you and good night.